That time I got reincarnated as a demon lord, English, by LordedoMal44. 40 moments of Tempest. All the executives were assembled. Even if the changes in me were small in terms of power, my skills improved a lot, and that seemed to be clear to everyone. After all, everyone was very tense with my presence. Or, suddenly, it could be the fact that I was about to declare war. Or, it could be. Seal. Could you take off my lap? Really? But it's so comfortable here. Even so, it will disrupt the meeting. Seal, even if reluctantly, got off of me and sat in the chair next to me, his body glued to mine as much as possible. Everyone's apprehensive gaze seemed to leave me, and he was guided to her. Proof that I really wasn't the reason for everyone's tension, but I couldn't complain to them. Even I was tense from having Seal glued to me. Tense enough to appreciate the fact that my mimicry is naturally asexual, and that it only has gender when I ask it to. Concentrating once more. As I was saying, we will declare war against the ogre village next week. I will choose the best soldiers who will participate in this battle during the week, but know that our numbers will be few. May I know why, Rimuru-sama? The one who raised his hand, with a doubtful expression on his face, was Rigor. Rigordo got a more stern expression towards his son when he saw him ask the question, but he didn't say anything this time, probably reminding that I prefer it when subordinates questions to my actions if they really have any doubts. After all, his questioning was valid. If we used number-based troops, I'm sure our chances of winning would be high, probably 100%. The strength of the goblins is still below the ogres in close-range battles, but if we took the Ks with us and made it a long-range fight, it would be a guaranteed victory. That aside from the troop of wolves we have on our side, who are second to the ogres in magical power. I nodded, agreeing with every single thing Rigor was saying. And indeed that's the reasoning a normal person should have, but I don't like the idea of thinking like I'm a normal person. Even because my goal is not normal, and normal methods will not help me to conquer my target. The thing is, if we used numbers, the ogres wouldn't respect us. They would see us only as the cowardly hobgoblins who subjugated them using their superior numbers, their powerful magical beasts, and their ranged weapons. That would make them resistant to accepting me as their rightful leader, would hinder my plans to dominate all the monsters that exist within the great forest of Jura. Everyone nodded their heads in agreement with my words. There was little known about ogre pride, a pride said to have caused ogres to have denied even serving a demon lord in the past. And I, who only aspire to achieve this level of power and respect, cannot expect to be immediately recognized by them. If it was an emergency situation and it involved a small group of ogres, then I might even have a slim chance, but we're talking about a village with over 300 individuals. They won't accept serving me unless I prove to them that I'm much stronger than them. The law of the fittest. More than once I've seen how that law rules here in the great forest of Jura. That's why, instead of taking large numbers, we're going to take only the elite soldiers. The elites of our soldiers will maintain a defensive formation in the rear and split up to take care of the lesser ogres on the battlefield, never acting separately. That way we'll preserve our strength while, every time someone gets hurt, that same elite will do their best to heal the injured. It would be preferable for everyone who was injured, goblin or ogre, to be healed in the rear. And with that I would like to have minimal casualties among the ogres, as that would be a waste, and on top of that an unnecessary murder. Even so, I'll only ask my soldiers to do this if they're confident of containing the ogres once they've been healed. The last thing I want is for one of my soldiers to try to help an ogre and end up dead. And the possibility that an ogre would try to steal our healing potions to weaken us is also real, so it would be a bad choice. After all, if any of my own were killed in this battle, I feel like I might end up killing all of the ogres. Furthermore, the ones who will really take the lead in the battle will be us from the Tempest clan. We will represent Tempest in this upcoming battle. Everyone nodded again, this time with a different feeling. Even though we are monsters, it's just a stereotype that we like to fight. Well, I like to fight, but that might just be because of my pain nullification, because if I had to feel pain every time I faced an enemy, then I would probably decide not to fight unless it was necessary. It could be said that this pain nullification ignited the competitive and vindictive spirit that I had kept inside me for all these years. It's almost poetic. Before we start the war, however, I would like one individual among us to go to the front. Whoever goes will be responsible for announcing to the ogres that we are declaring war and informing them that they will have a week to prepare. That they will be the ones to decide the place of confrontation and that they can take as many soldiers as they want, that our plans would not change. The last part was clearly a tease. It was like saying, we see no reason to prepare any more even if 300 ogres come to fight us, but I know the other part will get it. My aim is to make the impression that we are underestimating our enemy, to make the ogres see us as fools. After all, if they start seeing us as weak fools right from the start, then it will be much easier to crush them. The person delivering these messages will have to be really brave, Sue, provoking an ogre like that, Sue. I looked at Gobuta, and our eyes met for a moment. For a moment he cocked his head, confused as if he didn't know what I was thinking, but as soon as I smiled he seemed to realize my thoughts. He was first startled, then his eyes wandered around, as if looking for an escape route, and then Gobuta's eyes fell on Akami, beside him, who was looking between the two of us with a confused expression on her face. Gobuta immediately shifted his gaze between her and me, which lasted about 5 times, but finally he sighed, giving up. Look, we have a volunteer, and he did it of his own free will. If there was a moment when Gobuta wanted to curse having a girlfriend, wife, it was exactly in the current moment, in which he found himself. After all, this was a war, so why on earth did he have to be chosen as the messenger? Couldn't it be one of his underlings that he went to all the trouble of training? In the end, with Akami on his side, there was no way Gobuta would even consider denying him this opportunity. This is all because of Rimuru-sama. One day he would get even, he liked to think, but at the moment, that was pretty much just an impossible dream. Changing the topic of his thoughts, Gobuta averted his gaze to the path in front of him, still riding his wolf. Among all the mounts he owned, none was fast enough to match his first wolf companion, so it was the best option. After all, if the ogres took offense, he really didn't intend to stay to watch their fury be unleashed on him. It may not be a very common information, but ogres have a special intrinsic skill called Ogre's Rage that increased all their physical and magical capabilities for a short period of time, a type of berserker skill. Although they wouldn't completely lose their control over their thoughts, they would still be furious enough not to let their enemies escape. This means that if they fought, Gobuta would be forced to fight an angry ogre with his physical attributes upgraded even further. Despite that, for now he should keep moving forward, not caring. Akami, as Gobuta's girlfriend, had looked up to him ever since they'd met again, and she hardly seemed to have noticed any of the times he'd run away from his training and his responsibilities. It was almost as if, no matter what Gobuta did, as long as he didn't go directly in front of her, he would still have a good impression of her. Faced with a situation like this, how could he back down from this mission from an honor like this, as Rimuru had said? There was no way. Well, whatever. Let's go ahead. Saying that, Gobuta kept moving forward, advancing along that small road towards the village of the ogres. He had already gone further than the last time, when a group had come to investigate the ogre village. Furthermore, since he wasn't using the concealment of presence type skills he had used back then, he and his wolf had certainly already been spotted. Gobuta-kun, they've noticed your presence. A young ogre is coming towards you, and behind him are 2 others. Avoid combat if possible, but I highly doubt they'll be a problem for someone as good as you. Understood, Sue. Those weren't exactly the words Gobuta wanted to say, but he accepted silently. Rimuru was observing this situation with his 6 supernatural senses, a skill which allowed him to see despite the long distance. Furthermore, using his thought transmission, he would coordinate everything, just like he was doing now. Meaning, he would just watch from a safe place while putting Gobuta in the hole. You there? Who are you and what are you doing here? Gobuta immediately stopped his wolf when he heard those words. Looking in front of him there really were 3 ogres, just as Rimuru had said. The first one was a red-haired and skinned ogre with 2 horns protruding from the front of its head. The second one had brown skin and blue hair and only had 1 horn on its head, and the last one was an ogre with brown skin and black hair. Of all, the last one was what appeared to be the youngest and weakest of the 3, at least when you considered his appearance and amount of muscle. Of course, considering such a thing when dealing with monsters was utterly foolish, but the way the latter moved gave off an air of inexperience. Even Gobuta couldn't see him as a great warrior when he looked at him, even though he was an ogre. I am here on orders from my master, Rimuru-sama. He has given me a message, which I must declare to the ogres. The ogre in front, the one with the red skin and hair, didn't say anything, but the way he narrowed his eyes seemed to be an implied threat that ordered Gobuta to keep talking. He didn't seem to be in the mood to hear a message, let alone a declaration of war like Rimuru's, but at least he hadn't sent Gobuta away immediately without even hearing his words. Of course, Gobuta would have preferred that after all, at least that way he would have an excuse not to have to carry out his mission. Rimuru-sama declares that he plans to lead all ogres in the future. As such, at this very moment, Rimuru-sama, and all those who serve him, declare war on the ogre village. What? Furthermore, we have also declared that the battle will take place in a week's time. You will be able to choose the location and the exact number of troops you will take. This will not change our plans. Rimuru-sama's exact words are, "Please create a useless defense so that we can have fun destroying them and proving that we are the strongest." Gobuta had no doubt that the ogre in front of him was furious. Gobuta didn't need to open his eyes to know that, or hear the furious and almost animalistic snarl of the ogre. Even the aura that left the ogre's body at that moment told how furious he was. In short, all of Gobuta's senses warned him that he should run away as fast as his body could, but he couldn't do that yet. He had to wait for the possibility of an answer. "You, a little goblin like you, riding a direwolf, you dare to challenge us ogres?" Gobuta glared at the ogre as he seemed to have a hard time expressing his anger. This guy. He was underestimating him due to his race, wasn't that right? Gobuta didn't want to face this guy though, even if this guy was going to speak ill of his race. After all, the main goal here was just to declare war. Also, a direwolf? He couldn't even recognize their races properly, it seems. "You. Who do you think you are to say such a thing, goblin?" "Me? I'm Gobuta Su. I'm just a messenger Su." Gobuta's excited way of speaking seemed to surprise the ogre, but he didn't really give it a moment's attention in his mind. Gobuta was actually glad that he could introduce himself. After all, now that he had highlighted that he was just a messenger, the chances of him being attacked were lower than before. Despite that, Gobuta didn't realize that the real reason the ogre was surprised was, in reality, having a name. Immediately the ogre's mind ended up making an unpleasant association, and before he knew it, he had made a disgusted expression. "Whose messenger are you? You're not involved with Gelmuth, are you?" "No, I'm Rimuru Tempest's messenger. The king of monsters, as he likes to call himself." A smile appeared on the ogre's face when Gobuta said that, but it didn't seem to be a smile of happiness or anything like that. Of course, Gobuta didn't pay attention to that. After all, he had no way of knowing what was going through that ogre's mind. In the end, it doesn't matter much how much the names change. He might just be another arrogant Majin, and he'll meet the same end of messing with the ogres, just like the others. The mood changed, and the ogre had a mocking smile on his face as he spoke. The ogre, upon seeing that Gobuta hadn't said anything, felt that he was right in his thoughts and that the goblin's master must have been weakened after naming him, so what could he do? It's not like Majins can just go around naming countless creatures out there. Even ogres would have a hard time naming even one. In the end, this king of monsters must have just been a recent Majin who had no idea how the world really worked. I mean, I've never heard of this Rimuru guy. He must be just another weak minion, like the Gelmuth who came before him. So why would I care? Just tell this Rimuru guy that. Before the ogre could finish speaking, a sharp pain shot through the back of his head, and he felt his face hit the ground. He wanted to try to get up, but before he could do so he felt the cold steel of a blade touch his neck. "One more word and you'll lose your mind." The goblin, who was on top of his back, threatened as he tightened the blade against the ogre's neck. There was fury in his eyes, and for a moment, that fury made even him, the young master and son of the ogre chieftain, flinch. It was like he was facing another ogre. No, he was sure he was facing another ogre. The scene of what happened briefly flashed back to the ogre's mind. It wasn't that he had been unable to see what had occurred, in fact he had, but he had been unable to react quickly enough in order to avoid this situation. The goblin in front of him, still astride the wolf, dove into its own shadow and out of sight. The scene would have surprised him, as well as the two who were with him, but before he could compute what had happened, the goblin had come up behind him from his shadow and had knocked him down with a clean kick to the back of the head. Soon after, he had assumed his current position, his aura clearly indicating over the limit rage, while the aura he exuded made him question again the race of the goblin before him. "You can speak ill of my race all you want. Even after we come out of the trash, to a race like yours we must still look like trash." So, even if it was against our rules, I endured in silence. Gobuta stopped talking for a second, remembering things from the past. Basically, everything that happened to his village before Rimuru's arrival could still be considered luck. Without the protection of the storm dragon, the village would have disappeared a lot, and even being attacked by the direwolves would still be just luck, which would guarantee them a non-instant death. But they no longer lived on account of luck. They were no longer the same trash they had been in the past. You could even speak ill of my name and I wouldn't mind. Even if it was a gift from my master, I'd still put up with that kind of thing in silence, if it was to avoid fighting. But they shouldn't allow others to speak ill of their names. Gobuta knew that. But even knowing that, Gobuta couldn't help but think that if it was to avoid a fight, even if it had to humiliate himself a bit, then let others speak ill of his names, then it would only be natural. Enduring just that wouldn't be the problem, as long as everyone could smile together in the end. But no one slanders Rimuru-sama's name, and I guarantee there isn't a subordinate of his who will allow that to happen, even if we have to burn down the entire forest. No one could mock their savior, that was common sense in Tempest. Upon understanding this, Gobuta expanded his aura, even more irritated by how this ogre thought something so rude about Rimuru and, without realizing it, he ended up using a skill. His shadow ended up distorting and several monstrous figures, literally different monsters that everyone would see in the forest, came out of his shadow. Those were all of Gobuta's mounts, which had been summoned by his unique skill. Tempest. The knight, at that point, seeing what transpired on its back, all the ogre pinned to the ground could do was stop moving, unable even to breathe too heavily to avoid having its neck cut by the sword's edge. The other two ogres that accompanied him, his training friends, had also been paralyzed, not knowing how they should save their friend, even more than with all the beasts that appeared from the shadows. But soon after, the beasts disappeared and Gobuta let go of the ogre he had immobilized. His work here was done, he didn't have to fight. The message has been delivered. See you on the battlefield. Gobuta just said that and started to walk away. He knew, technically, that he was much weaker than the three ogres in front of him. Despite that, his fury left him with anticipation for the battle and a desire to be chosen to fight in it. Gobuta wanted to go back to find the red-haired ogre and defeat him. Only then would he feel like he could live an ordinary, everyday life like he normally did. With that said, it was only a matter of time.